A very good evening to our viewers. Thank you for joining us tonight on the agenda. My name is Epangelo, your host. Tonight on the platform, we are graced by the presence of Finance and Public Enterprises Minister Ipumbu Shiimi to bring us up to speed with the country's economy and related industries. And we are very, very excited, Minister, to have you on the platform. It's really, really a pleasure. I know that I've been looking for you for a long time. Yes. And whenever you were not available, I understood that you were not running away from me. You were just busy. So thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Mr. Njebela.
Wonderful.
And also for the understanding that we don't want to shy away from discussions like this. It's just a question of time. So
absolutely.
We will always try to make time. It may not be that specific time that you need us, but
absolutely,
we will make time.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Maybe to kickstart the conversation, Minister, give us a sense of the economy right now. We have gone through a very difficult period, maybe this past 7-8 years.
Exactly.
And you get a sense that there seems to be some sort of good signs, but you have a better view of that.
Yeah. No. You have characterized it correctly. Starting in 2016, the economy started declining. The growth in the economy started declining, and mainly because the commodity prices, as you know, the Namibian economy is driven by mineral production. We are a mining country, and unfortunately, starting in 2016, mineral prices started to fall quite significantly. And that had spillover effects on the rest of the economy, because if we are not getting income from the mining sector, it affects construction. A number of mines closed down, people lost employment. That also affect things like retailing, because people are no longer buying from the shops. Even the Kapana ladies will suffer because they are, people no longer have got income. So, and that has been a challenge since 2016 up to 2020 when COVID came. It actually found us in a very weak spot. And it just added oil to the injury, so to speak. So for the first time, our economy in 2020 declined by about 8%. That's something we have not seen before.
Absolutely.
Because COVID really reduced economic activities. We couldn't move, we couldn't go to work, we couldn't go to restaurants, and that destroys livelihoods on economic activities. But fortunately, things have started to improve now. Starting in 2022, we started to see the growth in the economy becoming more positive. In fact, the economy registered a growth rate of about 5.5% in that year. And that is injecting new life into the economy. And of course, tourism is not just about people coming to Namibia. These people are spending money at service stations, they're spending money at restaurants. So it has got a positive knock-on effect to the rest of the economy. So that will also then affect banking services, because the more economic activities you have, the more people are transacting. Financial services are also making money. So the positive momentum is felt across many sectors in the economy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, of the fact that our economy is primarily mineral driven. What is happening at Epangelo Mining? I always wondered, because this is the entity that is supposed to be at the center of all these activities, grabbing small stakes into different deposits, and overall it can then be that key entity. But I don't know whether it's just my own naivety, but I don't see much about Epangelo. What is happening there?
Yeah, so maybe we need to understand the reason why Epangelo was established. Epangelo was established to serve as an arm of government to participate in the production of minerals, but more specifically strategic minerals. Because as a government, we want to first of all be a shareholder, to understand how these minerals are managed. Because for you to understand, you have to be around the table. So for you to have the information that you need to understand how this whole activities managed. So that was the main reason, is to for government to be around the board, in the boardrooms, to understand how these minerals are managed.
Yeah.
Well, they are participating in particular sectors.
Yeah.
For instance, Epangelo is a shareholder in a Navajo mine, for instance. Is a shareholder in Swakop Uranium. But what we also need to understand is that for you to be a shareholder, it costs money.
Yes.
Yeah. And for them to have a significant shareholding, it means government will have to spend resources to invest in these activities. But that's also not really the job of government, because the job of government is to fund schools and hospitals and things like that. Because you may put money into a mining activity or a mining project, but this mining project may fail. So they have done something. They are busy now looking at the future to see how do they redefine their role. So I think some of these investments that they have undertaken in the past are now starting to yield some dividends. Like Navajo may start to yield some dividends. They may have some additional cash flow. So they will have now to start thinking about how do we deploy this additional cash flow that we have. Should we go into new mining activities, especially in the strategic mineral, for instance? There may be a case for us to be, for instance, a shareholder in a lithium mine, for instance. Yes. Because this is where the future is going. The future is on critical raw minerals, and lithium is one of them. Because that's what we need for the green industrialization. So it may make sense for government to be a shareholder in an entity like that, but not using its own resources, but maybe the resources that is already coming from the investments that Epangelo has made in the future. So some of those returns can be redeployed in those areas. So we are busy with that conversation to reinvent and refresh the thinking about how do we position Epangelo.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
When we're talking about the difficult years that we have endured for the past 8 or so years, Minister, during that period also, one of the major things that happened is the accumulation of public debts. We have gone beyond what was generally thought of as our national threshold. And then there was, I remember when we were at 40% or 42, somewhere around, late President Gengob at the time arguing that was still within the SADC sort of threshold. And then we went close to 70% of GDP.
Correct.
And I saw, if I remember, in your national budget this year, you have set aside, I don't know whether it's 10 billion or so, towards settling some of that. What is the status now? Are we winning this battle? I think there's a slight decline compared to a year ago. What is being done to contain it? Or are we going to see, as a matter of fact, that decline, are we going to see some momentum now of a decline? Or that was just a flash in the pan, we are going to see again us back on top of an increase?
Okay. Before I come to that question, so I just wanted to qualify the positive growth momentum that I have spoken about earlier, because there may be people saying that, we are seeing the economy is growing, but we don't see, more people being employed.
As a matter of fact, it's a good point, because I wanted to ask you actually, I just forgot to say, how is it impacting the everyday life of people?
Very good, very good. So impacting the everyday life, the fact that the country is getting more revenue, I think that's good, and therefore it's providing more revenue to government to be able to undertake public investments. So I think that's a positive part. But in terms of creating more employment opportunities, we're not yet there, because this is basically the old engines of growth that are coming back. So if you think about tourism, for instance, remember that during COVID, a lot of lodges closed down. So some of these lodges are now opening up and rehiring people. So from that perspective, is increasing more employment opportunities. But these are jobs that we have lost before. It's not that we are creating new jobs. If you talk about mining, for instance, it's a highly capital intensive industry. So you may see us producing more uranium, but it doesn't mean that we are going to hire more people. Of course, there are new mines on the horizons. They will employ more people, but it doesn't mean that it's going to solve our unemployment problem. It means as a country, we still need to work hard to unlock more economic activities, diversify the economy so that we can create more employment. So we need, on that specific aspect, we have to spend more effort to be able to, first of all, identify where the constraints are and remove those constraints. And that's a job of government and the private sector together. 100%. But let me come back to your issue on of the speed at which we accumulated debt. Yes, you are correct. Debt has increased over the past 7 years. In fact, even before, quite significantly. We used to hover around about 20% of GDP, and it went. You're right. It went to close to 70%. But it's linked to what I have said before. When your economic activities decline, it's not always easy to reduce expenditure, because expenditure is about spending money on hospitals, paying teachers, paying civil servants. So revenue will fall, but expenditure will still remain high. So how do you fill the gap? You borrow more. So that's exactly what has happened since 2015, and even before that. That revenue was declining for government to be able to undertake or to pay for these expenditures. It had to borrow. But then government also then took a deliberate decision that we need to start scaling down our expenditure slowly. That's why you, for instance, heard that government was looking at the wage bill, for instance. Should we continue to hire more people, or should we actually reduce the number of people that we are going to hire? And that has worked to some extent, although the speed has been a bit small, a bit small. But if you look at the number of public servants, for instance, it has come down quite moderately. And that's when you hear government talking about consolidation. It's really to ensure that we reduce the level of expenditure. For traveling, for instance, I remember, I think, before, the travel budget of government was in the region of 600 million. It has come down quite significantly. So now it's sitting in the region of about 250, 300 million. So those are all efforts that government has undertaken to reduce spending, to be able to live within our means. So that's one. The second thing is now going forward, or when the economy started to grow, it means we are generating more income. And that income is not being, we are not increasing our expenditure to the same extent. Because if you increase your expenditure to the same extent, it means that gap is just going to continue to be there. So what we have done is that we kept expenditure. We are reducing the expenditure. We're keeping it to the minimum, and that additional revenue that we are generating, or part of it, of course, it's to reduce the amount of borrowing that we're going to undertake. So the amount of borrowing, the quantity of the loans that we are taking, we are still borrowing, but the quantity is becoming smaller. And because the quantity is becoming smaller, debt as a percentage of our income, it's declining. So it's no longer close to 70%. It's now close to 60%.
Wonderful.
And going forward, we want to continue with that strategy that is going to continue to reduce debt below 60%. When the president was talking about the SADC benchmark, yes, the SADC benchmark is 60%. So that's what SADC considers reasonable. We overshot that. We went, as you said, we went to 70%. We are now back to 60. We are around the SADC threshold or benchmark, but going forward, we actually want to reduce it further. So if you look at our medium-term expenditure framework, debt is actually declining as a percentage of GDP. But what I need to highlight, though, is that so people look at debt in absolute terms, they look at the amount of money that we have. That is still going to increase. Because anytime you have a difference between revenue and expenditure, you will have to borrow. It's a speed of borrowing, and the quantum that you are borrowing that is declining. It's not the amount. It's not that we are not borrowing at all. We are still borrowing, but we are borrowing less and lesser amount, and that's why our debt as a percentage of our income is declining.
Yeah. Wonderful. Again, so when it comes to debts, there used to be this speculation for a long time. You know, China, we are owing China debts, we are selling the country to China. And then there was some very important reports that came out of government that actually showed that China actually is actually one of the least owed countries to our government. So who do we owe? Who is sort of our biggest creditor, if you like?
Yeah, very good question. Our biggest creditor is you and me and other Namibians.
Yeah.
So if you look at the composition of Namibian debt, about 75 is actually domestic debt.
Yeah.
So who are the creditors? The pension funds. Your pension fund buys government bonds and treasury bills. Yeah, because they are looking for investments. Yeah, and they are looking for long-term investments outlets. And government is one of those investment outlets, because government says, I want to borrow. So they are saying, okay, we like the returns that government is paying, so we are going to lend money to government. So you and I are actually lending to government. So 75% of the debt that Namibia has belongs to Namibian citizens.
Okay.
Through our pension funds, our insurance fund, through the money that we have in banks, the depositors' money, because banks also buy these credit instruments, the bonds and treasury bills from government, because they need it as an investment vehicle. Yeah. So that's the domestic part. So then the foreign part, it's now the remaining with the 25%. Now, if you look at the foreign part, for instance, the biggest one will be the Eurobond, which is close to about 14 billion. Yeah. So it's not owed to China. This Eurobond is investors from all over the world. The Americans, the UK, you may even have some African entities that have invested in this Eurobond. Because this is really, you invite everybody to invest in this instrument. Yeah. So that's the biggest foreign one. So if you look at the amount of money that we owe to China, it's about 1%. So it's very, very small. Yeah. So this notion and this perception that Namibia is heavily indebted to China, it's actually not correct. It's not accurate. It's yeah. So the amount of money that Namibia owes to China, it's quite small. As I said, it's 1%.
Yeah.
I think in absolute terms, it's probably something less than 2 billion. I think it's something close to 1.8 billion.
Okay.
Namibia dollar. Now, versus the debt of the country, which is close to 140 million. Yeah, or billions, not million, 140 billion. Yeah.
It makes sense. Yeah. The Eurobond is coming up. I think it's October 2025 or something like that. And that's quite a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
How are we doing ahead of that deadline?
Yeah. So what we have been, first of all, this is not the first Eurobond that is maturing. Maturing means that the deadline for payment is coming. So we had one that we retired in 2021. Was it 2021? I think we borrowed it in 2011. Yes. Yeah, 2021. So that one was fully repaid. Yeah. So we have experience in paying our Eurobonds. So that was $500 million US. So the next one is slightly bigger than the previous one, which costs $750 US. Close to about, as I said, close to about 14 billion American dollars. So what we have been doing is that we have been putting some money aside, and we'll continue to do so until the date of repayment. So we will pay off some of the bond. So close to $500 US, we will pay it off from these savings that we are putting aside. Yeah. So then there will be a reminder of 250. That's that one we are trying to see. Should we convert into a domestic bond, for instance? Maybe our pension funds here are looking for some more domestic instruments, so we can borrow from them and repay. Yeah. So that's the only part that we're trying to see how best, and that's a small problem to manage.
But you are confident you beat the deadline?
We will definitely beat the deadline. We will not default on our debt.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Minister, before you go for a break, let's engage on the state of public enterprises. I think for the longest of times there was this attitude that we call them, some of them, bottomless pits. Government just threw in money there for very sentimental reasons. It's to save jobs, it's to whatever, but there was really nothing coming out of these entities, especially commercial ones, who ought to be paying dividends to government and actually drive the economy.
Correct.
And then came the issue of Namibia, because it was actually one of the culprits in that regard. They have been liquidated. What would you say, especially under the new regime of the Public Enterprises Governance Act that came into place some years ago? Do you see any stability coming along in that space, or do we still have major problems?
So I think we are slowly getting there. I think we are getting a bit of stability, but we still have a lot of work to do. Because these are businesses. And how do you fix a business? You must make sure that that business is properly run. So you must make sure that it has the right board, and the board should have the right skill composition. That right board must make sure that they hire the right people. The CEO must make sure that they hire the right management, and it goes down like that. So governance is number one. So having the right boards, having the right management, having the right staff. Secondly, what we are also, and that's what we are focusing on. We are trying to be very, very selective in the appointment of boards. We will not always get it right. But I think overall the framework is there, and I think the boards are becoming stronger. What we are also then requiring them in terms of this law is that we want to sign a performance agreements with them. That these are the kind of things that you are going to focus on for the next 3 years, because they're appointed for 3 years. At the moment, the agreements are a bit more general, so we actually want to make it more specific to focus on the key performance areas of those boards. So we want the boards to tell us that these are the things that we're going to focus on for the next 3 years, and we can evaluate them on a yearly basis. So we are busy with that. Secondly, we also want to strengthen the development of board members, because you can appoint a board, but it doesn't come with, as a complete package. You still have to develop them. Just like in any situation, people have to be continuously capacitated and developed. So we also want to consolidate our efforts on training the boards, because at the moment, each and every public enterprise is doing it on its own. So we say we have a critical mass of people who need to be trained. We can actually coordinate that process instead of leaving it to each and every public enterprises to do it individually. We should coordinate that part. So that's one. The second thing is that we need to ensure that we enforce compliance with the law, because I think there's also a bit of a laxity to comply with the law. So we are now first of all, we have to improve our capacity as a ministry to ensure that we ensure compliance with the law, because if we don't enforce the law, that laxity will continue. So we will have to aggressively improve our internal capacity to ensure that the law is complied with. Then we also want the public enterprises to look at how do they develop their own staff, because if you don't develop staff, you not be able to function. You will not be able to compete, because many of them are actually in a competitive space. And if you don't have the right skills, you will not be able to compete with your competitors, especially the private sector, because they have all the flexibility to hire and fire whoever they want to hire and fire. So skills development is also very critical. We are also then asking them, how do you ensure that you have an effective performance management system across the board? We are evaluating the boards, so that we will do, but we also then want the board to evaluate the CEO, the CEO to ensure that senior management is evaluated and the whole staff is evaluated, so that you can create a culture of performance and a culture of delivery in these public enterprises. That's really where the focus is at the moment. In addition to that, of course, we also want to have a policy framework that defines how government should own public enterprises.
Yeah.
So we are busy developing that.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Perhaps the last question before the
Yeah.
break, related to that. What is government's attitude towards recapitalizing non-performing entities? Is that an absolute guarantee that don't worry, make as much losses as you want, we'll be there to capitalize you, or is government taking a hardline stance now going forward?
Yeah, so what we are saying is that these entities must be managed as business entities.
Yeah.
Yeah. So first of all, they have to make money. Yeah. If we are established to make, especially commercial public enterprise, especially if you are established to make money, you must generate enough revenue to sustain yourself. If you, for instance, if I take, for instance, one of the utilities like Namcor, for instance, you come back to government and say, I want to, develop, a hydro power plant, for instance. I don't have enough money on my balance sheet to be able to develop that on my own. We can then start to have a conversation. Yeah, because just like any business, if it doesn't have enough money, it comes to the shareholder to get that shareholder support. But this should not be an everyday thing. We want public enterprises to be self-sustaining and therefore generate their own money.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We go for a very short break and then return with Minister Ipumbu Shiimi. The conversation continues with Minister Shiimi. Now, Minister, again on public enterprises, if you can engage me a little bit on the situation, for example, at Namcor. It's a very critical institution of our country, especially at this moment of oil discoveries and stuff like that. Everybody's going on. How ready is this entity to carry us as a country in this critical period that we are facing amid many, many issues that are being reported at Namcor? The MD has been on suspension for, I suppose, a year, no, more than a year now. I think 15 months. I think he was suspended in April or so last year. And then the board, there were issues there. The board the chairperson arrested. Of course, that board is now also facing out, and the new one is coming in the coming days. There's an Angolan deal with Namcor that, as far as I'm concerned, is hanging in the balance. We don't know really what is happening in that regard. Money was paid to Sonangol, and we don't know where what the status is. And what makes me wonder, Minister, is regarding the MD who is on suspension. Okay, first, you have two MDs being paid. One is on suspension, and then the interim, Mr. Wanguta, who was brought in to lead the entity. Those are two salaries that are being paid.
Correct.
But we are also hearing that in the case of Mr. Mulunga, that Namcor is actually negotiating a severance package with Mr. Mulunga. It means he's either not guilty and therefore he must be reinstated, or he's guilty and shouldn't be entitled to any severance package. If you can sum up the situation at Namcor.
Yeah, so I think
it's a loaded question. There's so many things there, but
there are many questions in your one question. Yeah, and some of the details I will not be able to provide because as you know, yes, you're right. There are problems at Namcor, and you have seen, for instance, the board taking action on particular matters. As you said, the CEO is on suspension. They instituted a disciplinary hearing that started last year. Unfortunately, it went on for a long time. It was only concluded, I think, in March. So now the chairperson of the disciplinary hearing has to take a decision, has to pronounce his decision on the matter. So I will not be able to comment on that because that's something that we are all keenly waiting for. We are keenly waiting for the conclusion of this disciplinary hearing because, as you say, it creates a lot of uncertainties. You cannot take, for instance, the decisions on whether you have to fill the position of the ND, or whether the other ND, the other ND is coming back. So we want this matter concluded. But you have also, seen that there were irregularities that were found at Namcor.
Yes.
Yeah. Number of people, first of all, a number of them have been put on suspension. So the management is taking action. So I think my last count was about 8 people were actually on suspension, and some have resigned. But you have also seen that you probably also have heard that the current management, has also taken legal action. They have actually sued these people, or some of these people, for the negligence and the misconduct that have taken place at Namcor. You have also probably heard that they have launched a criminal application, charging some of those staff members. So there's a lot taking place there to try and regularize the situation and fix the situation. Of course, the outcome of the legal proceedings is not something that we can predict. But I think in terms of taking action to make sure that the institution is strengthened, so that is happening. Mr. Wanguta is there as a caretaker, and I think he's bringing stability to the institution. So it's really our prayer that the legal proceedings, are fast-tracked or are finalized, so that we can get certainty. Yes, the board, there will be a new board starting 1st of July. Not that the old board has done anything wrong. Their tenure has come to an end. And therefore we now have appointed a new board, and that new board is going to take over from the existing board.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What is the last briefing that you got regarding that Angolan oil block purchase? It's a big thing. It's a lot of money that has been put aside for that.
Yeah. So there was nothing wrong with the investment. There was something wrong the way the investment was done, according to the assessment of the board. Yeah. That's why the disciplinary hearing of the MD. So that investment is still continuing. Yeah. So and therefore it has not really been affected by what is happening at Namcor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because the fear is that maybe the money is gone now. And
no, the money is still secure. There's nothing to fear about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Engage me, Minister, also on this situation is probably more closer home to you.
Yeah.
The situation at the Bank of Namibia. The Competition Commission found the conduct of Mr. Gavakab there and his business partners wrong. They were fined. You are coming from the Central Bank yourself as governor, and the questions are being asked whether those developments are what we expect of a governor of the Central Bank to have. What did you make of that situation when it first came across it, and are you satisfied that it's now water under the bridge? What is your assessment?
I believe it's important to respect the governance architecture of the bank.
Yes.
Because the central bank law is probably one of the best laws of central banks in the world.
Yeah.
So it has made provision for incidents. For instance, if there is a gross misconduct of a governor, how do you deal with that? So the law makes provision that if the board believes that the governor has has committed some kind of misconducts, the board will have to pronounce themselves. That's one. They can institute some kind of a disciplinary or in an investigation.
Yes.
Together with the Public Service Commission. So those are the two entities that are involved, not the Minister of Finance. So I want you to understand the context. Yeah. I believe the board has done some assessment. They have pronounced themselves. I have not seen a formal report. Nor do they owe me a formal report.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's something which is squarely within the scope of the board.
They don't report to you as a
No.
board.
Remember, I don't appoint the board. The board of the central bank is appointed by the president.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is the governor. The governor is appointed by the president on recommendation of the Public Service Commission. Yeah. So the board has dealt with the matter. So the public service also has to deal with the matter.
Yeah.
So as far as I know, the public service is still looking for some information from the board. At least that part I know.
Yeah.
Because they have told me so. So those are the two entities that will have to pronounce themselves on whether that there was a misconduct on the side of the governor.
Yeah.
So and if somebody has to answer, it's really those two entities, not the Minister of Finance. Okay. The law says once they have decided to investigate the governor, there has to be a tribunal that has to be chaired by somebody senior, preferably a judge. That tribunal will have to do the assessment and the investigation and report to either the board or the Public Service Commission. Now, and when the Public Service Commission takes a final decision, before they recommend something to the president, because the president is the appointing authority, they will have to consult with the Minister of Finance. Only at that stage, they will then come to me and say, this is what we want to do. This is our view. We have investigated this issue through a tribunal. This is a recommendation from the tribunal, and we have looked at the recommendation, and this is what we want to do. What's your input?
Yeah.
Only at that stage, they can come to me.
Okay.
So they have not yet come to me in that regard, because I think, as I said, the board has pronounced itself, but the Public Service Commission is probably formulating their position on the matter. Yeah. So they will be the competent authority to answer that question.
Okay.
Yeah.
But as someone who sat in that position, you agree that, and this is not about Mr. Gawahab now, as a principle, you have to be beyond reproach as a governor of the bank.
Certainly. Anybody in a position of responsibility, you have to ensure that you do your work in a way that is going to create trust among the Namibian people, because they have put that responsibility into you to save their interest. I believe the governor is doing that, so I'm not here to pronounce myself that to say that he's not doing that.
Yeah.
But in terms of this particular matter, the people who really have to pronounce themselves in terms of the procedure of the law is the board and the Public Service Commission.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's talk about oil, Minister. What is the last or latest update that we have in our march towards production? Where do we stand now as a country? Or is it far? Maybe production is even a far away stage. But where do we stand in all these things? The searches, the explorations, everything.
Yeah. So I believe the people who have better information than or who have got information on oil is the Minister of Mines and Energy. From what we are hearing is that from the Minister of Mines and Energy is that there are companies that discovered oil, or groups that have discovered oil. They are now assessing this data to see whether this oil is commercially viable. So you may have a lot of oil in the ground there, but will you be able to pump it out commercially? So somebody gave me this analogy. It's like you have a tap. Yeah. Is this tap going to run or it's just drip, 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 drip? Yeah. Of course, if it's going to be drip, 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 then it's not going to be commercially viable. Yeah. So I think that's the assessment that is being done. And once that assessment is done, and if it's positive, and we hope it's going to be positive, then they will now start to build the production plants, and that will take a bit of time. They say generally it may take 5 years to build those production plants. So maybe it's only by 2029, 2030, then when we can start to see this oil flowing, if it's proven to be commercially viable.
Yeah. The debate, Minister, around oil is Namibia's stake in it. People are saying, this is our resource, it's in our ground or our ocean. And our stake in those blocks are very minimal. I've had Minister Alwendo here a year ago, and I posed the same question to him. His argument at the time was that there are various other ways to benefit from your resources without the traditional stake equity shareholding approach. How are we going to make sure, if this oil is proven to be commercially viable soon, hopefully, how are we preparing ourselves to make sure that we derive the maximum benefit that is due to us?
Yeah, I think it starts with our laws. Yeah, the law has to make sure that Namibia gets its fair share of the cake.
Yeah.
So our Petroleum Tax Act, for instance, it's something that has been in existence for quite some time, but we have assessed it recently, and we still think that it's adequate. So it may need some refreshing, maybe in the future, but for now, we still believe that it's going to serve Namibia's interest. It also then depends on how we're building the skills to be able to participate as Namibians. We must see more Namibians on the oil platforms. So that way the revenue comes also to individual Namibians. But first of all, the state must get its fair share. And we believe if we look at the Petroleum Tax Act, for instance, and other legislation that we have that is going to manage these resources, we believe that Namibia is still going to get the majority of the cake. In fact, at the moment, we think that about 65% of the cake will remain in Namibia. So the investors will only be left with 35%, which we believe is reasonable, because there has to be a fair balance. This is Namibia's resources, and therefore the biggest chunk of the cake must stay with Namibia. But the investors, because they are also putting a lot of money in fact, the money comes from them, you also want to compensate them fairly. Otherwise, they won't come. So we believe that our legal framework provides a fair deal to Namibia and a fair deal to the investors. Yeah.
The other question is the so-called Dutch disease, which is essentially a situation where an industry like that becomes sort of the focus industry, the backbone of the economy. We've seen it in Angola, for example, that a huge, significant revenue of the state is derived from that. So scary that if something happens, if oil suddenly becomes a non-essential commodity in the future, the country will collapse on its own face. How do we make sure that despite all these discoveries, including green hydrogen that is being talked about, they are all energy sectors, that other sectors of our economy remain running in parallel with these new industries?
No, that's a very good question. So as a country, we must ensure that our development strategy is not based on one sector, because you don't want to be a mono-sector country. You want to be a diversified country. You want to have a diversified economy. Any country that has actually made progress in development is a country that is well diversified. If you're only going to rely on one commodity, you are exposing yourself as a country to a very, very high risk, because if anything, like you said, if anything happens to that specific sector, economic activities are going to disappear. So our development strategy must ensure, and this is what is going to be in NNDP 6, must ensure that we aggressively diversify the economy. We must continue to diversify the economy so that we have more economic activities from different sectors, in agriculture, in tourism, in manufacturing. That's the only way that you can have sustainable development.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Minister, the budget that you tabled this year was, for me, one of the best that I've seen. Is it Is that what we're going to see from Ipumbu Shiimi going forward? Or is this a 2024 thing? It's election year. Mr. Ipumbu wants to appease everybody, and then 2025 we are back to the previous times.
No, it has got nothing. First of all, it has got nothing to do with Ipumbu Shiimi, and it has got nothing to do with elections. The budget must speak to the priorities of the countries. So, what are priorities? What is in this budget? First of all, it's looking at funding our priority sectors, education and health, but also more importantly, we're also bringing in the element of housing, because you know that we have a serious housing backlog. We started as a government working on a new housing policy, which was approved by Cabinet last year, in November last year. So the budget must respond to that. So the budget is really responding to government priorities. So housing is a new area that where we are going to focus and put more resources in that particular sector. But we're also then saying that when it comes to infrastructure, for instance, water, for instance, this is a drought year. So we have doubled the budget of water. It's now standing at 2.2 billion because this is a drought year and our people need water. So it has got nothing to do with elections. If you don't give people water, they're going to die.
Whether there are elections or not.
Whether there are elections or not, we must respond to the needs of our people, and that's really what this budget is doing. The other part, apart from the priorities, the other part is also looking at how do we help the households who is experiencing some hardships. That's why, for instance, we said let's lift the tax threshold, because inflation has been on the increase for the last 5 years, and therefore the real income of people has come under pressure. So let's give them some kind of a relief. And this is something we started with already in 2023. We started increasing in fact 2022 we started increasing the cash grants that is given to the beneficiaries of what used to be called the food bank.
Yes.
Yeah, because inflation, we remember with the war in Ukraine, inflation shot up. Things like cooking oil became very, very expensive. People really experienced a hardship. So the response of government was that, how do we help the poorest of the poorest?
Yeah.
So we increased that allowance. And then in 2023, we increased the allowance of the child grant, which was not increased for the last 10 years. So that was done in 2023. So we also increased it by 500, but we also then at the same time increased the old age pension in 2023. So we're just continuing on that path.
Yeah.
That households are experiencing difficulties, economic difficulties, because of higher prices. Let's give them a relief. So it has got nothing to do with elections. The company tax, for instance, it's again, we have been saying that we need to be competitive. We want to attract more investments.
Yeah.
Again, we are coming back to your earlier question of diversification. We can only diversify the economy if we can get more investments into the country. So let's reduce our company tax so that we can make it more competitive to attract more investments into Namibia. So this is the thinking.
Yes.
It's responding to the priorities of the country and help households to cope with economic difficulties.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have two more questions for you, Minister. One is related just to old age pension. It's this huge debate.
Yeah.
The late president, in his, I suppose, this final address to the nation in December 2023, spoke about his wish to increase this old age pension to $3,000 before he leaves office.
Yeah.
And then in April, I don't know at what occasion, you said that is going to be essentially impossible for now.
Yeah.
Because it's going to cost us about 15 billion or so.
Yeah.
Then the vice president, the current vice president, recently said she wants to deliver the wish of the late president.
Yeah.
What is what here?
I think we are all aligned. We are all aligned. So I think the president's wish was that, for old age pension to increase. And we all support that. Yeah. And that's why we have been increasing the old age pension.
Yeah.
Can we do it in 1 year? No, we can't afford it. And I think that's the same view of the vice president. She says in her presidency, when she's elected, she'll want to fulfill the aspirations of the president. Did she say she's going to do it in 1 year? I didn't hear her saying that, because that isn't going to work.
Yeah.
As I said in my budget presentation, I think when I was delivering the budget statement, is that for you to increase it to 3,000, you need an additional, if you include pension and child grants, you need additional something close to 15 billion. That is more than the current budget of the Ministry of Health, because the current budget of the Ministry of Health is about 10.9 billion. That is almost close to the budget of the Ministry of Education. Does it mean that you should close, all our public hospitals to divert that money to old age grant? No, that's not. I don't think that's what the president wanted, and that's not what the vice president wanted. But the idea is that we are going to move there. When resource permits, if we can do it, maybe if we'll find additional resources one day, maybe oil comes, we can do it in 1 year. Yeah, but it's not something that you can do in 1 year now.
Absolutely.
So that's really what we are trying to say. So we are all aligned.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, it's good that you clarify that.
Yeah.
Because the alignment is the most important message here. Because what you don't want is senior government officials sort of seem to be contradicting each other.
Yeah.
Because then it becomes, we don't know whether it's electioneering, whether it's it's reality and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And also for the old people, because when you gave them $200 recently, they were very disappointed, because they thought, that the big man has spoken. Who is the minister to come and contradict that? But I understand you. As a matter of fact, I must admit I'm a man of moderates. I don't like radical things. So I thought the way we have done it over the years, increasing by $150, by $200, for me, it's important. Especially, and perhaps this is my other question to you, is this obsession, if I may call it that way, with old people who, of course, are vulnerable people, and we need to take care of them. But I always have a sense that there isn't really a clear plan for young people. Because if we keep shifting all these resources to the older generations, and there isn't, while we have youth unemployment hovering around 47% or so, I think that is dangerous. What is the plan for young people? What are we doing for them?
Yes. What do young people need? The young people need to go to school. So we must make sure that we build enough classrooms, and that's why you see in this budget there's an additional something close to 1 billion. So it's 970 million for the construction of classrooms and new schools. So that's for young people. Education alone is getting a budget of about 18 billion. That's for young people. So we need to prepare them, we need to train them, we need to capacitate them for them to have access to opportunities, because they can only have access to opportunities when they are educated. And secondly, what we have talked about, aggressively working on our diversification strategy. Once we have educated them, there must be jobs to absorb them. And that's what we have to do for young people. And thirdly, it's not only are we putting money in a basic education. When they go to university, NASFAF is there to fund those who cannot fund themselves. So the way that program is designed is that any child who qualifies to go to university and the income level of his or her parent are at a certain level. I think at the moment is the combined income must not be less than if it's 500,000 or below, that child automatically qualifies to get a loan from NASFAF. So that's how we are preparing young people. But as I said, we don't just stop there. We must make sure that we create a conducive environment for more economic activities to be created, for these young people to be absorbed into jobs and create more job opportunities for them.
Absolutely. The final question to you, Minister, is and I know that you've addressed this thing in Parliament at one stage, the issue of the independent stadium. Because I don't know if politicians understand how, you're a sport man. You
Yes.
organize a
We
very
definitely understand.
yeah, because I think there are those who think is just
Yeah.
as
People
if it's
playing.
children playing on, and it's a very, very serious enterprise.
Exactly.
And for me,
Yeah.
when we don't have a stadium,
Yeah.
and our national teams, not only the Brave Warriors, because people tend to think only of the Brave Warriors.
Exactly.
There are under 20s, there are female women
Football.
teams.
Yeah.
All of them had to go elsewhere
Yeah.
to play home matches.
Yeah.
We could actually go to World Cup now if we had played Tunisia and Liberia at home recently when we drew against both of them. Maybe at home we could have won, and it would have put us in a very good position. Our players go to the World Cup, scouts will be there, and then they go to Europe and whatnot. It's an economic activity on its own.
Exactly.
But the situation around that, Minister, is what is more hurtful for me as a sport fan is that this government, our government, inherited a functioning facility and then it ran it in the ground. Our job as a new dispensation was simply to maintain the infrastructure that is already there. What are we doing about this situation? How soon can we have Namibian football teams playing at home?
Okay, so before I come to how soon, and so I want to give you and the Namibian nation assurance that this concern is discussed at the highest level of government, including it has got the attention of the president, it has got the attention of the vice president. So it's not that we do not understand the need to fix our independent stadium. I think that understanding is at the highest level of government. That's one. The second thing I also want us to understand is that it's not that we have not made financial resources available for the upgrading of the stadium. So we already started in 2022, as you said. You may remember that I actually went to make a statement because I went with my team to Parliament, basically just to make a statement that it's important that we invest in sports and fix the stadium. So what we now need to do is, as a government, is to ensure that we organize ourselves better, to ensure that this project is fast-tracked, and that's something that we are working on. The Minister of our Youth and Sports, of course, is championing that, but now we have realized that it should actually be coordinated better. So we shouldn't just leave it up to the Minister of Youth and Sports, because this is a civil matter, civil work matter. So Minister of Works and Transport also need to come on board to advise the Ministry of Youth and Sports. It's also a procurement matter, because if you don't do it properly, as you probably know that the Ministry of Youth and Sports awarded a contract to a company to manage this project. So in other words, to provide the service of an architecture, to provide the service of a quality surveyor. But this was challenged. It was taken to the procurement review panel, and the review panel took a decision that no, what the ministry has done was not in line with the law, and therefore it must go back and redo it again. So these are the challenges that we are dealing with. So we also need to be on board to advise the Ministry of Youth and Sport on how to design the procurement process in such a way that it's going to be less prone to challenges. Yeah, because if we don't look into those aspects, these delays will be there. So that attention is there. As a matter of fact, we're actually discussing it tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's receiving the highest attention of all of us. So we understand the importance of sports. So it's not only an economic activity, but it's also important that you have, young people that are physically active.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Minister Shiimi, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.
And a very engaging conversation. I think the nation has a better understanding now of many things that we discussed today than they did before this conversation. So thank you very much.
Thanks for inviting me.
Wonderful. There is Finance and Public Enterprises Minister Ipumbu Shiimi giving us a rundown on a lot of issues concerning his portfolio. We hope you have enjoyed this conversation like I did. Thank you for watching.